Hello, this is DrPaulCottrell, and this is going to be another episode of Grave Wisdom, episode 7, I think it is. I'm recording this on Sunday, April 7th. We're going to be going over what's been going on in Israel. Just to recap, last week we saw Israel strike a nonprofit organization that was helping with aid into Gaza. And they did an investigation, and they found that there was a firing on the Israelis fired on this caravan that was supposed to be cleared to go down a certain road along the coast of the Gaza Strip. Some sort of miscommunication happened, and they were hit and killed, unfortunately. And so Israel reprimanded some of the officers that were involved and disciplined others. And in the international community, that, added more fodder for, this push for a ceasefire. All right. Then you have the meeting with Biden and Netanyahu, a Zoom meeting, or, some sort of conference call kind of meeting. And that was basically where Biden was telling Netanyahu that he has a red line now and that he can't cross, and that he needs to de-escalate what's going on in Iran or in Gaza. In the same week, Israel did a strike on a compound next to the embassy that killed a general. All right, and in that that strike, now there is worry that Iran, because it was an Iranian general, that Iran is going to retaliate. So the last 24 hours, we kept on hearing in the news, maybe 48 hours, that Iran's going to retaliate. Iran's going to, retaliate. So there's some sort of telegraphing that there's going to be some sort of strike somewhere. Israel emptied some of their embassies in certain countries. But it doesn't seem that Iran is willing to really escalate this. All right. There's the United States has kind of, published in the news where the U.S. assets may be at risk because of this retaliation from Iran. So you have the Iranian issue, the striking of their general, the killing of their general, the killing of the aid workers. There is a pullout of a certain region within Gaza that's happening that we'll be covering. That just happened probably 12 hours ago. But the Rafah push is still happening. So I think that Netanyahu is recalibrating on how he's going to execute the war in Gaza. There's fighting that's happening, with Hezbollah still. And we have a lot of protests that are going on in Israel to do new elections to kick out Netanyahu. So there's a lot going on top of the red heifer maybe being sacrificed before Passover. You have the eclipse and all the conspiracy theorists that are talking about that. So let's dive into the news about Israel the last 48 hours or so, and where this is probably going for the week. I'm going to be doing hopefully a recording tonight with John Hogue, and we're going to be talking about Israel, the red heifer, the eclipse, and all this stuff. So this should be interesting. Before we start, please, could you make sure that you subscribe to all my channels? I have 6 channels. I have 3 YouTube channels, a Brighteon, Bitchute, Rumble. Also follow me on X and on GETTR. That way you can get the notifications. Also, if you could, please be a paid subscriber to my Patreon channel. That way it helps support my news coverage, where the news that I do is free for everybody. I don't put it behind a paywall. If you're a higher tier member on Patreon, you will get special access to some of my lectures that I've done on pulmonology, and I'll be releasing lectures on immunology soon. You can also support my news coverage by donating. You can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description of this video. And you can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. That way you help support my work, and I can, reach a larger audience, and I appreciate your support. So let's begin with Al Jazeera. This was published about 4 or 5 hours ago.
The contradiction is obvious. Talk about the need to protect civilians and aid workers, but make sure Israel faces no consequences for its actions, and then keep the weapons flowing. Wash, rinse, repeat. That sums up the Biden administration's approach to Israel's war on Gaza, even as it carries out war crimes and youth.
I can't even get through 30 seconds without having to interrupt. Al Jazeera, guess what? Hamas is embedding its military within the civilian population. And if there continues to be civilian casualties, why isn't the international community telling Hamas to stop doing that? Wash, rinse, repeat. Al Jazeera?
Food as a weapon of war. After Israeli forces killed 7 humanitarian workers for World Central Kitchen, U.S. President Joe Biden put out a statement critical of Israel. But then the White House rushed to declare its unconditional support of Israel. No change in policy. So despite the theatrical protests, is the White House setting up a new forever war in the Middle East? And what's the effect on the United States itself, where the hypocrisy is clearly visible to a lot of voters, particularly younger voters, who don't buy this equation? Today, we're talking with Anel Sheline, who quit her job at the State Department in protest of the Biden administration's support for Israel's war on Gaza, and Khalid El-Gindi, a former advisor to the Palestinian Authority and now a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute. Anel, you just resigned from the State Department. You put out a statement about why you resigned. You're a contractor. You're not the Assistant Secretary of State. You're not the Deputy Secretary of State. You're not the Secretary of State. You're in the woodwork of the State Department, and yet you're using this moment to focus attention on this crisis. Tell us about your decision.
So first, thanks so much. So first, thanks so much for having me and for drawing attention to this issue. I had thought about resigning earlier. I was at state as a foreign affairs officer working in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, Near Eastern Affairs, trying to promote human rights in the Middle East. And it had just become so difficult to try to do that in the aftermath of October 7th. It felt that it had gotten to the point where I had tried to raise objections internally to the extent that I was able to, like through dissent cables, for example. But eventually it just got to the point that it seemed that resignation was really the only option left. And then when I was speaking with colleagues, they encouraged me to do so publicly in order to draw more attention to this. So I decided that I would go ahead and go public to try to contribute to these efforts to push the administration to adopt a different rule.
Let me push you a little bit further. October 7th was a trigger for a lot of different players in this drama, right? Clearly, Israel felt assaulted in a way, and you saw a consensus of opinion inside Israel about a response that you haven't seen in a very long time. So it was across from left to right about reacting. Do you think that the U.S. at that moment took the right policy course in the way it supported Israel in that moment? Should it have anticipated the what we now see is a kind of overreach and an incredible impact on victims, casualties among civilian kids, women, even men. I mean, I have to tell people, I keep seeing white flags go up, and that's almost a sign to be shot. So tell us about that dynamic.
I think the fact that President Biden came out in his response warning Israel to not react the way the US did after 9/11 was really wise on his part. I think, unfortunately, there was no effort to actually try to ensure that that didn't happen. The sort of overreaction we saw from the United States in the aftermath of 9/11 and this overreaction from Israel, we know that the Israeli military.
There's a comparison fallacy here. There was no chance that the Islamic community during 9/11 would be able to take over the United States. Impossible. Could they create havoc? Yes, but impossible to take over. Israel's surrounded by a bunch of Muslim countries that want to kill them. It is possible that Israel falls. Big difference, honey. Big difference.
Is capable of carrying out very precise surgical strikes. And that is not the approach that they've taken in Gaza. I mean, based on my understanding of what we're observing, this is a policy of collective punishment that they are trying to engage in ethnic cleansing to try to remove the population of Gaza, to make life so unlivable there that people cannot survive or are forced to leave. And
if you notice on how these liberals talk, you notice that their fluctuation of their voice is like they're almost nervous, or at times when someone, on this ultra liberal side that's against Israel, they have a tendency to kind of fluctuate their voice, and there's like a nervousness, and their articulation, their point is muted. You're seeing it with her. This is not the only time I've seen this well covered in the whole Israel issue. And it's usually from the ultra liberals, a little bit maybe that she's a little nervous being on Al Jazeera. But there's this little reality facts kind of get into the mind, and she's like navigating it. All right. That's my observation. But, so be it.
Right. I think another important thing to keep in mind here is that, Prime Minister Netanyahu's political future depends on this violence continuing, and he has no incentive to either get his own hostages back or to end the violence. So I do think the U.S. administration is just being somewhat naive.
So when she was talking about this ethnic cleansing, right, or genocide, right, Israel is going to the biblical boundaries, honey. So it's not really Gaza that's the problem. Gaza needs to be flattened because they became an existential threat to Israel. But what's going to happen is everybody in the West Bank is going to be moved into Gaza. That's Palestinian. It's going to be moved into Gaza. All right. And the West Bank is going to be opening up. And then through something, I don't know if it's through peace or through war, I don't know, but a piece of Jordan is going back to Israel, and a piece of Syria and a piece of Lebanon is going back to Israel.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Yeah, of course you don't. But the thing is that, and the Sinai Peninsula. So it's going to be, there are pieces of the Sinai Peninsula. So there's going to be biblical, Israel's going back to the biblical boundaries. That includes the Temple Mount. That includes Jerusalem. So there will be a two-state solution eventually, but it's nowhere near the amount of land that the Palestinians have now. It's going to be much less. It will be Gaza. But for that all to happen, they have to rebuild Gaza and make it more prosperous. And what is great is that with the oil that is on that's in the zone that is owned by the Palestinians that, for Gaza, that area has oil and gas. All right. My understanding it's more gas than oil, but either way. But there's an oil and gas reserve in the water that's owned by the Gazans. That's great. That is great. That means that they have money to be able to extract those resources and to help to build their community, on top of international money coming in to rebuild. Now, there's other fields that are outside of that area that are part of Israel. All right, so there's an Israel section field, and there is also a Gazan section field. Now, the truthers think that it's Israel trying to push out the Palestinians out of Gaza so they have the oil field. They don't need it. They got more oil adjacent, more oil and gas adjacent to it. They don't need that. And this oil field that is part of the waterway owned by the Gazans will be a perfect resource to help build their society. So a two-state solution is moving in that direction. But a two-state solution, which includes the West Bank and Jerusalem, is a no-go. So it's not that they want to do ethnic cleansing and push them all out of Gaza. That's not how it's going to play out. The Gaza Strip's not part of the biblical boundary. I mean, everyone from the Biden administration is an idiot.
Blind to the political incentives on Netanyahu's side when they keep pushing, they keep talking about their efforts to push for a ceasefire, but are not using American leverage to get there.
Khalid El-Gindi, I've been reading your work intensely for now almost half a year. It's almost half a year of this crisis going on, and the gap between what we hear about
goldfish memory. This issue is not a 6-month issue, dipshit. This issue is going all the way back to the twins being born. And that is Jacob and Esau. That's thousands of years, plural, thousands of years ago. I'm just amazed at how dumb these people are. And now I know that people that are watching me, many of them agree, what I'm saying. They see it. They see the pattern. They know what's going on. They get it, right? But there's many people that are just oblivious. You can't look at this in only 6 months. What about in 2006 and 7 and 8 and 2014 and a kicking the can down the road? It's not a 6-month problem. This thing goes all the way back to the Crusades.
President Biden talking about the fact that we need to minimize casualties, Israel needs to minimize impact on civilians, etc., and then the lack of conditionality on this. I'm just interested both from your own perspective as someone who knows the Middle East well, but also the hypocrisy.
It seems to me that these people have brain fog. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the clarity factor so it prevents you from having brain fog and acting like these dipshits on Al Jazeera. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, take the clarity factor every day or twice a day. It will help you to focus at work and on your school. It will also allow you to have dendritic, the dendrites firing. So your neurotransmitters are firing more regularly. You'll be able to concentrate. You'll be able to solidify memory better. And you're going to maintain that mental acuity or improve your mental acuity. So it's part of that anti-aging protocol. Slow down the aging process. Take this every day, and you're not going to have brain fog. You're not going to get stupid like these dipshits on Al Jazeera. In addition, take resveratrol. It's an antioxidant, but it also gets rid of senescent cells. Senescent cells are cells that don't want to die. They just sit there because they're just they ran out of telomere length, and they just accumulate because they're sitting there. They're accumulating toxins. So you want to get rid of them. Get rid of the senescent cells by taking resveratrol. On top of it is an antioxidant. So take that every day. And so you don't get scurvy, because you know scurvy is just rampant in the Gaza Strip. Take vitamin C, and it'll also improve your skin. It is an antioxidant, but it's not as strong as resveratrol or C60. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin C. So you don't get scurvy. It improves your dermal layer. When you drink filtered water and you take the collagen, they'll be cross-linking, so the dermal layer will be better. It's an antioxidant, and it'll help to boost up your immune system. Take it every day. If you're sick, take a double dose of of vitamin C. Back to the stupids.
That Americans are watching in an election year, and how that gap is going to play out.
The reality is that not only is the American public not there, and specifically Democratic Party constituencies have, I think, are increasingly vocal and angry at where this administration is. But even inside the Washington policy establishment itself, we hear very mainstream voices, both Democrat and occasionally also Republican voices saying the president looks weak. The president is being led by an extremist prime minister with his own survival in mind, and who is himself.
Biden looked weak before October 7th, physically, mentally, and economically. His policies are a failure. Ultra-liberalism failed. Destroying America has nothing to do with what's going on in the Middle East. He was a failed president before October 7th. It's just that he's such a failure that he needs Michigan to win, and he's not going to win Michigan if he doesn't play nice with the squad and the Palestinian contingency in Dearborn, Michigan. That's what's going on.
Beholden to a band of extremists in his coalition, and the president is constantly being humiliated by the Israelis, who are thumbing their nose at the president and Secretary Blinken at every opportunity.
Well, let me interrupt you there just for a second, Howard, and ask you: is Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's political survival undermining President Biden's political survival?
Yeah, it seems so. It's pretty remarkable to me, and it really shows, I think, the extent to which this president is blinkered, is willfully blind to certain realities. And I do think that it is kind of caught up in the person of Joe Biden. I think most people in the administration have probably moved on in their thinking, but the real kind of, it's the person of Joe Biden who is the reason that we are stuck where we are.
Well, this takes us back to a nil.
Mark my words, Esau is not stupid. He's conniving. He's a killer, and he's conniving. And the soul of Esau is going to try to convince the world at large that the international community needs to stand up against the soul of Jacob, the soul root of Jacob, and prevent the Temple Mount from being rebuilt. Now, you really think that if God does exist, which I think he does, all right, and there is such a thing as, the Bible, right, and there is this battle of the soul roots, do you really think that the international community is really going to be able to stop the hand of God? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to turn out very well. So if bad things happen to people that are supporting the soul root of Esau, don't be surprised that you lose your presidency. See, they're thinking like this is the same problem in Ukraine or in China. It's not. The things that are going on with Ukraine and China and war and all this, that's international affairs, geopolitical stuff going on, trade routes, oil, energy, right? What's going on in Israel is biblical, it's metaphysical, it's different. It's different. So people that pontificate like this are irrelevant. They're irrelevant. They're not getting to the root cause. Now, because of who he is, he's going to gravitate to the soul root of Esau. Well, the way I am, I'm going to gravitate to the soul root of Jacob. Here is the problem. I just demonstrated it. It's going to be the battle of the soul roots. Let them duke it out. I'm pretty sure the soul of Jacob is going to win.
Line and her resignation from the State Department. I think a lot of us are struggling with whether you are a boutique actor or you represent many others who share this perspective, whispers in the hallways, discomfort with the direction of the administration. We've seen letters from donors. We've seen anonymous letters written by White House staff and others. There are very few who have stepped forward, Anel, and done what you did and resigned your job and position. And as you wrote in your eloquent essay in CNN, this may foreclose a future for you in foreign service. And so you put this, so how unique are you in this environment right now? Are there others out there that share your perspectives?
Many people share this perspective. People inside state, many of them want to do that work because they believe in what the United States says it's supposed to stand for, and they believe in the work they're doing. Many people are doing extremely important work on Gaza and on accountability measures for Israel, but those won't come into effect unless Biden wants them to. So there are efforts sort of waiting in the wings, but until they get a sign off from the president, they're not going to be put in place. So, I think for many people who work at state, they would like to still believe in the work that they're doing, or especially if they're working on this issue, they are doing everything they can to try to shift US policy here. But again, those kinds of decisions get made at the very top.
What I was struck by was how you felt that no one was returning your calls, that America doesn't have voice on this anymore. Tell us what the implications of that are.
So, just to be clear, I was working on, human rights issues, not, Israel-Palestine was not one of the countries in my...
You got to remember here, she's a policy wonk that thinks to solve this problem, it's UN. To solve this problem, it's some sort of international community, singing Kumbaya. How are you going to be singing Kumbaya when the Temple Mount needs to be rebuilt, but the Dome of the Rock is there? And you're surrounded by more than 1 billion Muslims. How are you going to do that when you only have about 6 million, 7 million Jews in Israel? So 6 or 7, even 10 million, let's just say. 10 million versus 1 billion. Doesn't seem that Israel is evenly footed in this situation. I'm telling you, it's not about stupid PhDs that are policy wonks. And how can they miss the boat on this? 90% of the people out there are sensing that this is biblical. Well, maybe 75%. With that, I'm going to go to commercial because this is peanut. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin D3. It helps with gene expression because it's a cofactor that helps to absorb calcium. And it'll help to get rid of cells that are infected in it by having those cells go into apoptosis. Take this every day. I take 10,000 individual units. So this, I take these soft gels. They're 5,000 individual units. All right. One in the morning and another 5,000 in the evening. So I take 2 soft gels. And I've been doing that for many, many, many years. I drink it with milk because D3 is lipid soluble. So do this every day to help to improve your health. In addition, to reduce inflammation, because Al-Jazeera will make you inflamed, please take the ashwagandha. This will control your blood glucose levels. And turmeric is an antioxidant, and it will help to bring down those pro-inflammatory cytokines. So take that on a regular basis, and it'll bring down that inflammation. It'll reduce the chances of cardiovascular disease, and it'll help to boost up your immune system.
Portfolio. But my work was impacted, very significantly by the conflict, partly because civil society in the Middle East and North Africa, in the wake of October 7th and the U.S. response, didn't want to have anything to do with the U.S. government. The U.S. had lost all credibility as an entity working to promote human rights. In addition, it just became that much more difficult for the U.S. government to criticize any of these Middle Eastern governments about their own human rights record, such that there's a meeting with a foreign official, for example. Usually our office would try to emphasize a particular case or concerns around, freedom of expression, freedom of association, political prisoners. But in this context, that doesn't get emphasized as much. It's not a priority, or, the immediate reaction from the government is, who are you to lecture us about human rights? To your question of how widespread is the sentiment, people are devastated. The State Department has held listening sessions for people to talk about this. There have been multiple dissent cables. I co-authored one. I signed 2 more. I don't know how many there have been total, but my understanding, people are very concerned and they're trying to speak up. I do think that overall, the broader question here for people inside state, although they try to remain apolitical, there are a lot of concerns about what this
educated person, Ph.D., all right? She's not dumb. She kind of is being dumb, though, but she has intelligence, all right? But she's not seeing the big picture, which makes her stupid, all right? As the fit of the soul root of Esau loses, there's going to be a fit from the soul root of Esau as Esau loses power and the soul root of Jacob gains. And this is similar to the stories that you hear about during the, as the Messianic era gets closer, how Satan, or the evil inclination, starts to lose power, but it's trying to convince people, right? And it's having its own fits as it's dying, all right? And this character, we'll call him Satan, all right? All right, this character can embed himself in nations politics, or even people that may not even, they're not evil people, but they are speaking to try to strengthen Satan or strengthen the soul root of Esau. And you're seeing it playing out right here. You're seeing it play out right here, where they think that, okay, we can't let, all right, from the point of view of Satan, he can't have the temple be rebuilt. So you have these pseudo-intellectuals getting up there trying to create some kumbaya UN policy that would only strengthen the soul root of Jacob, or only strengthen the soul root of Esau and not Jacob, and strengthen the power of Satan, because it's preventing the temple. Remember, when that temple is rebuilt, it's the destruction of Satan. It's the death of Satan. So Satan doesn't want to die. So it will embed itself in people like her, trying to promote some sort of international community that is liberal, that's not religious, that doesn't really follow any edicts, that actually is promoting loss of country, loss of family, and loss of religion. You're seeing it playing out with this. Satan is going to use the international community to try to demonize Israel to prevent the temple from being rebuilt.
For US politics. I mean, the Trump administration really undermined the State Department, and people welcome this administration's pledges to reestablish US moral leadership, to emphasize human rights, to engage in international institutions like the UN. And in the wake of October 7th, it's become
You
clear
don't notice the orange man bad?
those things are not in fact the priority. And what is the priority is this unconditional US military support for Israel and political support, like in the UN. So I think many people just feel very betrayed. I know there are more people who have resigned quietly. We haven't seen many public resignations, I think in part just because it's part of the culture of the State Department to not sort of, seek the spotlight, or just so much of that work is done quietly and out of the public eye. So I think for many people, they're just not really accustomed to that, to coming out publicly like this.
Right. Well, I want to get your reactions to a soundbite we have from National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby responding to the aftermath of the death of 7 World Central Kitchen aid workers.
We continue to look at incidents as they occur. The State Department has a process in place. And to date, as you and I are speaking, they have not found any incidents where the Israelis have violated international humanitarian law. Unless you think we don't take it seriously, I can assure you that we do. We look at this in real time.
And now I want to ask you to respond.
Get your free copy of my new best-selling book, Commercial Real Estate Investing for Beginners. All you have to do is click on the link below.
And now I want to ask you to respond to John Kirby's comments that specifically mentioned the State Department. To me, sound a bit Orwellian. How do they sound to you?
I would just counter that reality is fairly clear here. We have other governments and other international institutions, bodies around the world that have demonstrated very clearly the ways in which Israel is committing gross violations of human rights, war crimes, in this, as you mentioned, directly targeting journalists, targeting aid workers, targeting hospitals and healthcare workers, on top of just massacring civilians.
I'm not so sure that it's targeting, honey. What about Hamas embedding itself in the population to hide, and then wanting the collateral damage so people like you on the international community stage starts to demonize Israel because Satan doesn't want the temple?
The State Department is not yet ready to acknowledge that because that would necessitate a different course of action. Israel is violating US laws here. So for example, the Leahy laws are not being applied, or Section 620I of the Foreign Assistance Act. These and other laws would require the US to change its behavior. But until the White House is ready to take a different approach here, the State Department is not going to acknowledge that. And so we are going to continue to see, as you said, this sort of Orwellian disregard for the truth, which again gets back to some of my concerns about this all is starting to sound very Trumpian, or just the ways in which reality is denied. People can see with their own eyes what's happening. They have direct accounts from social media from people inside Gaza. And
Satan and the soul root of Esau are cunning. And if you don't have moral fiber in terms of God, country, and family, you're going to fall in her trap. Orwellian. What we've been going through with the Biden administration is Orwellian.
This administration doesn't seem to have caught up to the fact that they've lost the narrative here. They can't continue to just treat this as a PR issue to be managed, that they have to take a different approach, or they do risk not only, losing this election, but sort of the credibility of the United States on the world stage writ large. I mean, this administration likes to talk about great power competition with China, with Russia. We have the obviously ongoing Ukraine conflict, and there's a lot more at stake here. As Khalid mentioned, I mean, it's devastating for the people in Gaza, but it's much bigger than that as well.
When you listen to the perspective we just heard from the White House on the Biden administration versus some of the other voices that are also very senior in parts of the U.S. government, what do you make of it?
I think there's something going on here that a lot of people don't know about. When in the minds of Israeli military and political leaders, they are not committing war crimes. They genuinely believe that they are abiding by at least a version of international humanitarian law, but they have a very different standard as to who is a legitimate target and who isn't than we do here in the United States, or that most Western nations do. They don't talk about,
What will that standard look like if Rafah is attacked in a full-scale attack by Israel, which we know they have an interest in doing, and actually U.S. war planners are now working with them in some ways on Rafah, where the bulk of the population in Gaza has swelled into that.
If DrPaulCottrell is right, and this is metaphysical, and this is like been, in the works for thousands of years, all right? Why should the Israelis be pushed around by the U.S.? Isn't there many verses in the Torah, in the Bible, that warn people that if you don't follow what God wants and you follow because you're afraid, or someone else, some other king, some other president, that bad things are going to happen to you? Yeah, I think so. And don't you think that Satan would try to convince the wider public to fall into, just follow what the U.S. wants to say, just follow what the international community wants to say, not about the Temple Mount being rebuilt. No. I mean, if you actually listen to someone, if someone in your circle is talking like this, all right, ask them, what's your take on the temple? Should the temple be rebuilt or not? If God is ordaining it, should the temple be rebuilt or not? Would the international community allow it? And they would have to say, well, we can't have that because the Dome of the Rock is there. We wouldn't have had this problem if the Christians didn't lose the Crusades. This has been a battle for thousands of years. It's time to get it over with.
That calculation looked like then.
if we take the open source reporting on this at its face, we know that the deliberations are not going well. The Israelis presented a plan for moving 1 million people, but they had no contingency for how they would be fed or what kind of water source they would have, what kind of sanitation. I mean, these were not factors in the Israeli calculation. And we're told that these meetings got quite heated. So my sense is that Israel is going to move forward regardless of what the U.S. thinks, because as we already pointed out, right now, Israel is looking at what the United States is demanding as a recommendation, right? They have no reason, they'll take it into consideration, but at the end of the day, they will probably discount it because there is no or else. There is no consequence to completely ignoring what the administration says. And in fact, there's quite a strong incentive to disregard what the United States wants to do because of Israeli public opinion, because of Netanyahu's own political survival.
Right.
And so I don't see that trajectory changing.
Now, I know that you are acting, you have a belief in apolitical stewardship of the responsibilities you have, and you've taken a political act in your resignation. But I want you to put on your mathematician hat for a moment. And we just saw a political primary in the state of Wisconsin, and 50,000 people voted uninstructed. That is a vote not for Joe Biden in that primary. Joe Biden in the last election against.
This is PNN. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Health Max 14, Health Max 35, or the Silver Solution. Take a teaspoon of this a day, and it will neutralize pathogens. You gargle with it, you swish it in your mouth, you swallow it. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. In addition, you can get these applicators where you can put this liquid into a spray bottle, either a dropper or a nasal spray, and you can carry it in your bag. It's a lot better, especially if you're going to work or whatever and you need to spray a surface or spray the back of your throat, or use the nasal spray if you're not feeling well. You can get these applicators on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and use this every day as part of the anti-aging protocol and to boost up your immune system. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the toothpaste. This is the best toothpaste that you can get. It has no fluoride in it. It's made from structural nanosilver. It'll whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, neutralize pathogens, reduce the gingivitis, reduce the plaque, and help with cardiovascular disease and valvular disease. Because most people don't know that poor oral hygiene can lead to cardiovascular and valvular disease. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get a few tubes of this toothpaste. It's the best toothpaste that you're going to be able to get. It's very high quality. Get it from my store and help support my work.
Trump won that state by 20,000 votes. We saw similar activities in Michigan. As you look at this and you kind of look at the political tectonics of people either voting for someone else or abstaining, do you think that this conflict, which would be the first time I think we've seen a foreign affairs issue matter so much in an election, do you believe, given you're young, you're tied with folks, you're talking to them, do you think this will have that much consequence?
Absolutely.
Daphne here has finally stopped scooting. It's all because of this.
Absolutely. I think one thing that I worry about a little bit is that the Democratic establishment may assume they've sort of lost those voters, so there's no point changing tack now. And they may have lost some. I've certainly been in touch with people who say there's no way they would ever vote for him. But I do think that if this administration took a different tack, and again, merely imposed American laws, just follow US law, which they are required to do, which would mean cutting off US military assistance to Israel and insisting that aid is allowed in and insisting on a ceasefire, many people would be willing to vote for a president who did that, because I think, as you said, it is unusual the extent to which we're seeing a matter of foreign policy playing such a big role here. I do think, it's April. There is time to shift here. There are so many people who could be saved if Biden just took a different approach.
Right.
I think the concern is, as we get closer and closer to the election and things just get worse, not only the coming decimation of the people trying to seek refuge in Rafah, but also Israel just bombed the embassy building, the Iranian embassy building in Damascus, and is threatening to invade Lebanon. We know Americans.
I said it's about killing Hamas, killing Hezbollah, and knocking out the military apparatus and the theocracy of Iran. And until you do that, you're not killing off the sole root of Esau. It's very simple, honey. Really simple. And why is Hamas in Rafah embedded in the population? The Palestinians, by allowing Hamas to do this on October 7th, they lost the gamble. And someone has to pay for losing at the poker table. All right? They want to socialize the loss and privatize the gains. Oh, we're going to try to kill Israelis, but by the way, it didn't work out. Oh, help the international community. And if it did work, let's say in their wildest dreams, they were able to kill all the Israelis, all right, on October 7th or 8th, all right? And there was no Israelis around anymore, all right? You really think that those types of people are in line with democratic values, in line with constitutional freedoms, in line with Western ideals? No, they're not. So why is the Western community aligning with the soul root of Esau when all they want is a caliphate and kill you?
Up with forever wars. If Biden doesn't stop Israel from expanding this conflict into a region-wide conflagration, there's no way Americans are so tired of this.
It doesn't matter what the Americans think, honey. It has to be done because this is a big, long, multiple 1,000-year arc. And Satan is embedded in people like her, embedded into the Biden administration, embedded into the psyche of many Americans, especially ultra fucking liberals.
So I'm again, we've already said that we're sort of confused by the ways in which this administration is acting against American interests, against their own electoral interests. And it's just unclear why they're not taking a new approach.
All right, thank you. Howard, I'm going to give you the last word here and ask you to answer a question that kind of confuses me. Where are the rest of the leaders in the Middle East at this moment? Why aren't they putting conditions on their own relationship with Israel, Jordan, Egypt, others? Where is the broader response?
It's really easy to answer this question from the metaphysical perspective. Ishmael's soul root is different than Esau's soul root. And Ishmael is being aligned with Jacob to kill Esau. That's why.
Middle East to this, which seems like they've got a foot in and a foot out of consequential decisions. We're talking a lot about the United States not putting conditionality on its relationship. Why aren't other Middle Eastern states doing that? We'll have to make this the last word.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important question. I think part of it has to do with this is the United States. It's very hard to defy the United States. I think also we have to look at the nature of these regimes. Egypt, Saudi, UAE, Jordan. These are authoritarian regimes that have quite.
You have a U.S. advisor that is not antithetical. Let me rephrase that. You have a U.S. advisor that is in line with the Palestinian cause. You also have a Palestinian former advisor that is in line with the Palestinian cause. Where is the advisor that's in line with the Israeli cause? Al Jazeera, where is it? Oh, by the way, Al Jazeera's symbol it looks like a flame of a devil coming out of it.
Atrocious human rights records of their own. Human rights is not a particular priority for them, either for their citizens, much less the citizens of other countries. And so, they're really all about interests and their own parochial interests of the survival of the regime. So whatever they think is can promote that goal.
Right.
And conversely, if they see the Palestinian issue as possibly posing a threat to their regime, we see a little bit of that in Jordan. The Jordanians have been the most vocal, probably, of Arab states in opposing what Israel is doing in Gaza, in large part because they have a population that is mostly Palestinian, and the monarchy there doesn't feel all that stable. So this is a factor, I think, for Arab public opinion, but there's quite a lot of hesitation. People are not able to go out into the streets the way they did, to say, during the Arab Spring more than a decade ago. There's fear from their own regimes. There are major crackdowns on anyone trying to organize. So all of these, I think, are mitigating factors.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your candor, former State Department officer.
All right, lovely. All right, let's take a look at this. Is Fox News about Biden holding back Israel.
What about rights? That is one term that everyone loves in America. The right, the left, the wokies, the libertarians.
Here to discuss where the war stands now is George Mason University and Scalia Law School professor and director of the Center for Middle East and International Law, Eugene Kontorovich. Eugene, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
What should Americans be thinking right now, 6 months into this war, and what are the movements in the Gaza Strip mean right now?
Who could imagine 6 months ago, when Hamas invaded Israel and murdered, raped, tortured, that at this point, President Biden would be holding Israel back from defeating Hamas and rescuing the hostages? And that is what's happening. That's what happened on the call last week with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Biden said, red light. And for a couple months, President Biden has been stopping Israel from taking Hamas's last stronghold. It's almost like if the U.S. invaded Germany in World War II and stopped short of Berlin. If we invaded Iraq and stopped short of Baghdad. America is not letting.
Why is that? Why is the American president saying stop?
There's probably two reasons. He is concerned about his progressive base, and he wants to make sure that college kids in Madison, Wisconsin turn out in November for the election. He wants to make sure the Arab community in Michigan turns out for the election. And he seems to put that ahead of basic decency and basic morality, and is betraying one of our closest allies in this time of greatest need.
What is the Israeli public thinking of that? I mean, we see the protests, right? Is that about the conduct of the war? Is that about Bibi Netanyahu? What's the sentiment amongst the Israeli people?
So the protests, I think, are both about a frustration that the war is not yet won, because I think not everyone understands in Israel that it's because Biden has given a red light and stopped Israel short of success. There's also frustration with Prime Minister Netanyahu, but most Israelis, I think the overwhelming percentage of Israelis, are committed to fighting this war to the very end until Hamas is completely defeated and Hezbollah is defeated in the north. But, I think it's good that they're protesting.
Hezbollah's defeated in the north. Is that part of the war? Because right now,
absolutely, because this is not just a war against Hamas. Right? On October 7th, it wasn't just Hamas that attacked. Hezbollah attacked all Iran's allies and puppets in the area, encircled Israel, and attacked together. Right now, people don't know this. Close to 100,000 people who live in northern Israel are outside of their homes, are refugees, internally displaced people. Israel's effective territory has shrunk, both in the north and the south. Israel cannot live with parts of the country uninhabitable due to Hezbollah rocket fire.
So how, in the south, against Hamas, how quickly can that be wrapped up?
I think it could be, the minute President Biden says it's okay, I think...
Why does the Israeli leadership have to listen to Joe Biden?
So I don't think they should necessarily, but his leverage includes things like cutting off weapon supplies. Large number of Democratic congressmen, including former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, signed a letter calling on President Biden to stop weapons shipments to Israel. Now, the fact is, I want to get back to the protests for 1 second, because I think it shows something. In Israel, it's a democracy. Different people can express their opinions. What protests aren't we seeing? The Palestinian protest against Hamas. The Palestinian protest, release the hostages. Or the protests of the Arab American community in Israel against Hamas. So in Israel, there's two sides to opinion on the war. But why are the Palestinians not protesting? Why is there nothing on that side saying, release the hostages and the war?
Well, I think we know.
So,
and that's why this continues. Eugene, exit question. Does an open front open up on the north against Hezbollah? I mean, are you going to have to go into Lebanon?
right. So right now, Hezbollah is on an almost daily basis shooting missiles into Israel. Israel cannot live like that. And obviously the only way to do that is going to be to enter Lebanon and push Hezbollah north of the Litani River, as the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701 actually requires and demands. Needless to say, that resolution's not.
And I said this was going to be happening right when I started covering what happened in Israel on October 7th. And it is now April 7th. And this is the month where Jacob is the strongest for this cycle for the year.
Force itself, Israel's going to have to make it happen.
All right. Eugene, thank you very much for visiting us. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Thank you.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm right.
I'm Steve Ducey.
All right, that's that. All right. So now, this is France 24.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is saying Israel is now just one step away from victory. So he's certainly not presenting the withdrawal of the 98th Division, that's about 10,000 men from southern Gaza, as a step back from the conflict. Certainly not as a reaction to US pressure. What the Israelis are saying, you mentioned there the IDF statement, is that they've achieved what they set out to achieve in Khan Yunis. Their intelligence gathering operations have been completed. Their military ground operations have been completed. As far as they are concerned, Hamas's Khan Yunis brigade has been dismantled. Therefore, there is no further need for them to be there. In the meantime, what that does, they say, is it allows the population of Khan Yunis, just one of the biggest cities in the Gaza Strip, displaced to Rafah in the south, to return to their houses in Khan Yunis, which in turn makes it easier for the Israelis looking forward if they decide to launch an offensive against the town of Rafah on the border with Egypt, something they've been threatening to do, but which the Americans have been asking them not to do. So as far as the Israelis are concerned, not a step back, but perhaps a preparation for something else. And in that context, it's interesting that they're preparing to send a further 3 divisions, that's about 40,000 men, to the edge of the Gaza Strip, on the Israeli side, obviously.
And ceasefire talks seem to be moving forward
So when we hear in the news that Israel is retreating, it's only in Khan Yunis, which they've already done the operations they need, and they're reconfiguring, they're reorganizing to be able to do another hit in the south. And the Biden administration is worried that would expand the war another 3 months or so. Well, if that happens, then you got April, May, June, all right? So early July, and that could be, what's going on, Israel would probably win. The Palestinians would be all upset. Dearborn, Michigan wouldn't be voting for Biden, and Biden most likely would lose in November. See, this is all about the Biden administration trying to win an election. And it has nothing to do with really the real longer-term peace for the world by solving this problem. And that is knocking out Hamas, Hezbollah, and the military apparatus and the theocracy of Iran.
With the talks expected in Cairo today. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it's interesting that these talks are taking place at a pretty high level, given the fact that there's not an awful lot of optimism around at the moment, but the pressure certainly on Israel from the United States, with Joe Biden saying he wants an immediate ceasefire, and from the Israeli population demanding either or both that Benjamin Netanyahu should go and that more should be done to prioritize the release of hostages from the Gaza Strip. You know, the context is there, the pressure is certainly there on the Israeli side. Many Israelis accuse the government of not putting enough weight behind the negotiating team, trying to limit the amount of freedom they have to negotiate with Hamas. But the delegation that is there from the United States, the chief of the CIA, William Burns, from Qatar, the ruler of Qatar, the head of Egyptian intelligence, and a Hamas delegation in Cairo as well, suggests that a lot of pressure is being put on internationally to try and get something to happen this time round. It is unlikely that it will happen. Hamas, for its part, is saying, first of all, for something to happen, the Israelis have to agree to a complete ceasefire. They also have to withdraw all their troops out of the Gaza Strip. And they have to allow for the return of Palestinians who have been forced out of northern Gaza. Israel describes those terms as delusional, but the fact perhaps...
You notice that his voice starts to give? Now, he's not nervous. It's just that he ran out of secretion in his throat, and it's starting to give. But it's amazing. If you watch these people, there's a tendency for them to have some sort of physical manifestation where they can't speak correctly. Now, maybe I'm just observing something that's just a coincidence, but I see this a lot.
Israel has withdrawn some of its troops today from Gaza, may make it possible to get some shift forward.
He was really suffering there. Okay, so now let's take a look at this is DW talking about the same issue here.
The Israeli military.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver soaps that I have. I have very high quality structural nano silver soaps, help to neutralize pathogens. They smell great. This one happens to be lavender. I also have it in charcoal tea tree, peppermint, oatmeal spice, and lemongrass. So please go to the store, get the 5 different versions of the structural nano silver soap. It's a very high quality product. Get a couple bars for your home, and you'll enjoy that product. There are many people, especially the ones that watch my show, that just can't sleep. And you need 3 cycles of REM sleep. Because if you don't get 3 cycles of REM sleep on a regular basis, what will happen is that you won't be consolidating your memory, so you'll have memory loss. In addition, you'll have toxins in the central nervous system and the rest of your body that start to accumulate. You need restful sleep to be able to have that energy in the morning to get up and take on a new day. So go to my store and get the Good Night formula. It has tryptophan and melatonin in it. Take it every day to get that 3 cycles of REM sleep. You take this if you are having problems sleeping. There are many people that do. And if you have chronic sleep deprivation, you will increase your chances for brain acuity issues like dementia or Alzheimer's or memory loss. So please go to the store, add this to your household. Take it. There are many people that aren't sleeping very well lately because they're worried about the economy, or they're worried about the election, or they're worried about the red heifer, or they're worried about the eclipse, or they're worried about whatever. The dollar store closing, whatever. Also, please go to my store and get the lignans. This is a very high quality product. It's a powder. You mix it with your food. It helps for hormonal health and for your immune system. So this powder has a little scooper in it. So you take a scoop of this, mix it with your food, or just with water. Take it every day, and it'll help to boost your immune system. It's for males and females. Again, we've gone through a very tumultuous time since 2020, and people's immune systems are down for various reasons. I've gone through all the physiological reasons why that is. You really need to boost up your immune system. There is a common theme when I talk about anti-aging and the boosting of the immune system. If you don't, other diseases are going to start to pop up. Some of them can be just bothersome type diseases. Some of them can be life-threatening. It's really important to boost up your immune system. So please take my advice, and quality products that help to boost up your immune system are like lignans. So go to my store, get the powder, take it on a regular basis. It's for males and females, help to boost up your immune system, and you'll notice that it'll improve your hormonal balance.
Announced it has pulled all but one brigade of its soldiers from southern Gaza. They did not provide any further details about the withdrawal, but Israeli media reports say ground operations are now likely to focus on intelligence-based targeted raids only. Local media is also reporting that the remaining troops will still guard the corridor separating North and South Gaza that was constructed by the Israel Defense Forces. For more, I'm now joined by Marina Miron, a military analyst and associate professor at King's College London. Marina, what does this withdrawal mean on the ground?
Hello, Melissa. Well, given the situation on the ground, this withdrawal will mean that, well, obviously there will be still one brigade in the south, which in Israeli terms would be 1,000 to 2,000 troops on the ground. However, the nature of the military operation in Gaza will change, and I expect a much slower pace in terms of the airstrikes that we have seen before that claimed many civilian lives. So it will be much more focused, and obviously this will also have an effect on the plans to enter Rafah, which I think are now, at least for the time being, are off the table.
Is this off the table for the time being over the next few weeks? Is it possible for the military to regroup and eventually take that ground offensive on Rafah? That's a big question I think a lot of people are wondering.
What we have to understand here is that it doesn't depend on the military. The military is an instrument of politics, and the political situation, and I think it was essentially a political decision to withdraw the troops from southern Gaza because of the mounting international pressure after the killings of aid workers on the one hand. On the other hand, Israel needs international support, the US and the UK support, and both countries have voiced concerns over and over again. We have UN Security Council resolutions. We also have today ceasefire talks in Egypt. So depending on what the outcome of those talks will be, that will determine the future course of the operation. And we also have to understand that Israel also is expecting a retaliatory strike by Iran. Whether it will be directed by Iran or by Hezbollah, we do not know. But Israel itself needs troops, and it's been mobilizing reservists, which has been harming Israeli economy. And then you have the population and the pressure on the Netanyahu government and the protests inside Israel. So the situation for Israel is quite complicated. Therefore, I think that reducing the pace of the situation until some of these factors can get normalized to a certain extent is a wise choice to wait out. Therefore, I cannot say whether it will be in a week or two or maybe in a couple of months. It all depends on these conjunction of factors I just named.
Israel says the goal to eliminate Hamas's Han Yunis brigade there have.
You notice that everyone is missing the boat with the whole red heifer. What happens when it's sacrificed on the altar and it's burnt and the ashes are collected? And watch the previous video. You know, I go into a little bit more detail reading some of the Bible. about this. That is going to piss off the Muslims so much. And it will probably escalate and give a catalyst for a larger conflict in that region. But it was meant to be. Don't be a pacifist. Don't worry. If you're on the side of good, you will be fine. If you're on the side of bad, if you are, part of Satan, right? You're not. It's not going to bode very well for you. But all these political analysts talking about the black swan or the red heifer, I saw a probability. A red heifer is a chance of a kosher red heifer, right? Is 1 out of 50,000 cows, all right? But it doesn't take long for them to become unkosher, where they have more than 2 hairs that are not red, all right? So when you do that, when you calculate that all out, 1 divided by 50,000, right? It is 0.002% chance that a cow would be born a red heifer, all right? Now, a black swan is 6 sigma, which is even smaller chance of that happening. But the point here is that there is a low probability, high impact event coming if that cow or cows are sacrificed on the altar. And it's going to blow up all this strategic understanding of the region radically.
Reach, and that's one of the reasons why they can leave. How possible is to verify that?
Well, we don't have more intelligence than what the Israeli military says, unfortunately. And yes, we have those gains. However, in the grander scheme, it is not enough to reach the military objectives that Israel has set. Therefore, I think, of course, they say that they have reached one of the objectives to explain their activities, because it would be too difficult to name all the political implications that these military activities have caused. Therefore, I think that maybe Israel will also need to recalibrate its military aims and create a viable political aim for Gaza, because the military cannot, in itself, solve the problem.
Marina Miron, a military analyst and associate professor at King's College London, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And in the studio, I'm now joined by DW Middle East analyst Shani.
As the Middle East starts to go up in flames, you're going to need to get really high quality deodorants, especially when they start barbecuing the red heifer. Please go to my store and get the high quality deodorants that Rainbow Herbals have created. I have it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, and the other one is in citrus. Now, this has no aluminum, no baking soda. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas, and this is a dual purpose product. You use this every day as a deodorant, but because of the high quality essential oils that are in this, it'll help to slowly detoxify your body. It's for males and females. Get a couple bars for this for your household. Go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Very high quality product, extremely high quality product. And again, it has a dual purpose. Because the world is going up in flames and you don't want to smell.
Shani, why do you think this is happening now? Is it because of U.S. pressure? It was very clear that the Americans did not want to see a ground invasion of Rafah.
That's true, but if you ask Israelis officially, then no, this has nothing to do with international community pressure, which we've been seeing mounting in last week following the killing of aid workers in districts. It could be that they were just using the fact that it's a 6-month anniversary and trying to make it not connect. Otherwise, not connected to any certain events, but sort of make it symbolic. But the military has been winding down operations in the last couple of weeks, and they've been saying that they don't have any need to leave the soldiers exposed. Once they are in Gaza and they're not maneuvering, they're not in action, then they're exposed to maybe targeted attacks by Hamas.
Khan Yunis retreat. It's not even retreat. Pull out after doing the operations. All right, and reconfiguring and making some movements, other movements in southern Gaza, but it also is freeing up a northern front escalation, maybe even a West Bank escalation.
Intense, they don't want to do that. So for now, and IDF, the way they try to sell it, it's always been part of the plan. It does not mean anything about Rafah, because any action taken in Rafah will have to be taken only after the population has been evicted. This is something the Americans are demanding. Israel has agreed to that, and it will take weeks and weeks.
What does this withdrawal mean for this ceasefire deal that never seems to happen, but always so close, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because Israel has always, officially tried to say that the only way to get Hamas to get any concessions and agree to anything on the negotiations about the hostage deal is through applying military pressure, and a lot of it. And this is what they've been doing in the last 6 months. We've seen over 32,000 Palestinian casualties due to that pressure. And so Israel kind of withdrawing its forces, it also means a slow withdrawal of that position of only pressure will be the one bringing any breakthrough in the negotiations. It could be connected to the fact that now we know that the talks are being resumed. There's going to be new delegations going in and out of Cairo in the next days. Maybe we're in a point now where most points have already been agreed on, and now what's on the table has nothing to do with that. It's hard to say. We really don't know what's happening between closed doors in those negotiations and talks.
It has been 6 months. How has the view of, I know it's a very divided country, lots of different opinions, but how has the country changed in terms of its perspective on the conflict?
Well, I think there's a slow understanding that something isn't working. Netanyahu kept saying in a very confident voice again and again, Israel will keep on fighting until the complete obliteration of Hamas. They're far from doing that. We've seen rockets against Israel this day from Gaza, as if 6 months has not happened. So it's clear something isn't working. It's clear there's going to be a change, but it's also clear there's going to be a political backlash from the right side of Netanyahu, who want to see more action and not less military action in Gaza. And we'll see how it unfolds in the next days.
GW Middle East analyst Shani Rosanes, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Liz.
Alrighty, that's that. Let's take a look at all right, this is Talk TV.
Of Israel. Mr. Barak, thank you for joining us on Talk TV this morning.
Thank you for having me.
I wonder what your reaction is to the withdrawal of the vast majority of Israeli troops from the southern part of Gaza. That is perhaps a question that many people will have, especially when the Israeli government was thinking and talking a lot about an invasion of Rafah and defeating Hamas that way. What's your reaction?
It's the right step at the right time. It's clear that Rafah operation, if and when it opens, it might take several weeks, because first of all, we have to make sure that at least a majority of the million refugees from the northern part of the Gaza state who came to Rafah, the southern part, will be moved in a way that will enable a massive operation. That operation itself may take several months. So basically, it's a matter of months, several months. So it tells you that the time is right now to probably have a deal with the hostages to release them, because there are now probably less than 80 of them still alive, and they won't survive there for another few months. So I see the most probable or most preferred process as having a ceasefire for several weeks, having an exchange of hostages, and then there will be of we have highly responsible, top quality guys, the head of Mossad, the head of Secret Service, and a former general. They are as serious as the government. They should be given a wide mandate to bring the best possible deal they can get at referendum, and the government will decide. I reject the idea that we should know in advance that the Hamas accepting what we want before we go and resume serious negotiations.
How stable do you think your successor, Prime Minister Netanyahu, is at the moment? Because there are many people who, there's a huge amount of opposition, not least from hostages' families within Israel. People say that he is perhaps hanging on, that he should call an election. Some people say that shouldn't happen when Israel is at war. You're a former Labour Prime Minister in Israel. You're obviously an opponent of Benjamin Netanyahu. But what is your assessment of
the Israeli
situation?
military hasn't?
Look, I envy the UK. If this a similar event would have happened in the UK, the Prime Minister would resign on the October 8th, at most at the evening, and if he would not do it on his own, the leaders of his own party would call him to the upper club, and at the end of the lunch, he would announce that he decided to resign. But Israel has a different norm, so he tries to maneuver to survive. I should tell you honestly that about half of the public of Israel thinks different than myself, that he should stay until the end of the war. But 4 out of 5 Israelis totally lost trust in Netanyahu and see him as the main responsible for this whole blunder, the most severe blunder in our history. And 3 out of 4 adults wanting to resign. About half of them saying immediately, and other half after the war. But we don't think of wars of many years. In Israel, wars are something very short usually. The most successful one we had took 6 days, some 55 years ago, and the most demanding one, some 50 years ago, took less than 3 weeks.
Yes.
So basically, he lost the trust and he has to resign, but political mechanism is very complicated and subtle in Israel. So it's not clear when exactly it will happen, but I believe that in the coming months we'll have election.
You think you'll have an election and you think Benjamin Netanyahu will lose that and be out of office? That's what you think will happen?
I'm confident that if election will happen before even a year passed since the blunder of October 7, namely before October this year, he will lose for sure. He will not survive it. But if you stay somehow manipulatively for another year from now or more than a year, you cannot them for sure.
Mr. Barak, it's interesting that you called the 7th of October one of the most severe blunder in Israel's history, and that a lot of people hold Benjamin Netanyahu responsible for that. Tell us why they hold him responsible for it, because it's 6 months on, it was perpetrated by Hamas terrorists, yet a lot of the blame, of course, has gone to Benjamin Netanyahu. Just tell us the original thoughts around that and how that's developed over the last 6 months.
It was the October 7th was the worst day in our history as a nation. It never happened in one day since probably the Holocaust, since the closing of Auschwitz, that so many Jews were killed in a single day. And it happened in a place that had been established to start with, to begin with, in order to become a place where Jews can go to sleep at Friday night and being assured that they will not be kind of wake up in the morning to be slaughtered or raped or mutilated or whatever. And the victims were most of them civilians, elderly people, babies, women, elites was terrible. So it's the worst blunder, literally. It's the equivalent of the UK losing in one morning on your own soil the life of, let's say, probably 12 or 15,000 Brits. And, so I see it by far the worst. But since then, even the running of the war was, in my judgment, was very kind of courageously and devoted sacrifice of fighters at the front. Some almost 300 of them were killed since 7th of October, and another 300 or more in 7th of October. I mean soldiers, not citizens. Yes. And but the results, the objectives of the war are far from being completed even now. So we opened with very wide-scale operation in Gaza, and later on the center and the last in Khan Younis, which is more to the south. Yes. But basically, Hamas is still there. Its military capability has not been eliminated, and hostages are still there. So we are far from reaching our objective, and there are very harsh critique from members of the war cabinet, 2 generals who joined from the opposition, and some of the people in the service in uniform and in public.
Now this is this is Barak, Ehud Barak. Now he was Israeli prime minister when Arafat was running the PLO and the Palestinian state, right? And it was during the Clinton administration where they almost had a 2-state solution. And Arafat declined it. So if that peace agreement would have been made during the Clinton administration under this Israeli president with the 2-state solution, the Palestinians would have had more land than they have now. But because they wanted the whole enchilada, meaning the Palestinians wanted more of Israel, they lost out. And now there's going to be more of an erosion. And I find it odd, more than odd, that it's Barak that's on Talk TV saying that Netanyahu needs to go because conducting the war inappropriately, because of the intelligence failure and it's taking too long. But the thing is that it's harder to dig out Hamas and Hezbollah now in 2024 than it was back in the 90s. And this is proving my point that I was stating back, many videos ago. Stop kicking the can down the road, because each episode of violence increases. The cost increases, the number of people that are killed that are combatants increases, the number of civilian casualties increase, the chances of unconventional warfare increase. So even though he tried to have a 2-state solution with the help by Clinton, President Clinton, Arafat decided to say no. And now, fast forward 30 years later or so, I'm not sure what year it was, maybe it was 98, 97. So, and, we have this crisis now, 20 plus years ago, I guess. We have this crisis now. Just find it odd. It's just it's like teleporting back into time. Just Google, Barack, Arafat, and Clinton, and look at some videos on that and what happened.
Is heavy criticism of Netanyahu for not taking any decisions. It's Israel has not yet set a clear objective, clear vision for the morning after. There is an old Roman saying, if you don't know which pole you want to reach, no wind will take you there.
Yes.
And we have not yet done even this. We are creating a major crisis in the United States.
That's what I want to ask you, Mr. Barak, that's what I want to ask you about in terms of the United States, because there will be some who will say that this withdrawal or almost total withdrawal from the southern part of Gaza is actually because of American pressure. We've had a big row in the UK this week after those aid workers were killed by Israeli drones. Of course, Israel has apologized, and there have been many military personnel who have been dismissed from their posts and so on. But nonetheless, there's a debate here in the United Kingdom about selling military provisions and arms and so on to Israel. Is international pressure getting to Benjamin Netanyahu, and should he listen to it?
I think that he feels the pressure and probably acts upon this pressure. But basically, he's doing something that I, for example, many others argued from day one. That if a Israeli prime minister has to make a choice, and it's a binary choice, are you going with the United States, with these axis of moderates facing the axis of rogue states, Iran and Syria, and the Hamas, and the Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Houthis in Yemen? So, do we say yes, but to the Americans and join them, or do we choose to go with those messianic racist extreme ministers in his government, which has messianic visions that have nothing to do with the interests of Israel? I have a clear perception. We should join hands with the Americans and establish a common vision to the morning after, takes into account our security demands and other things, but deploying a multinational Arab force for several months and bring the Palestinian Authority by improve Palestinian Authority. And Netanyahu rejected it, not because of the interest of Israel, but because of his personal interest. He is dependent upon these racist, messianic, Michigan, as I call them in Yiddish, not minister, and they are dictating to him policies that are against the interest of Israel, but protect his coalition. So in a way, he preferred his personal survival.
Think about this, all right? The world's going up in flames because of what's going on in Ukraine, Israel, potentially even China. And what do we have? We have people like We Are Change, all right? That will, do shows like the solar eclipse. Isn't it an actual apocalyptic doomsday scenario is brewing? I personally think that nothing will happen during the eclipse. It's one big nothing burger. It's like Y2K, and it's going to cause, try to convince people to be in fear. It'd be interesting if they sacrifice the red heifer during the eclipse, but chances are they won't. And I did a video on why I think that. But everyone's focusing on the wrong thing. They're titillated on stupid stuff. This is where the ball is.
As a prime minister over the explicit interests of the country, and unfortunately, we have not yet made it to defeat them. We expected the opposition to do it, but the opposition in Israel is too passive. So the role has passed to the public, and the public starts more and more seriously to demonstrate against the continuation of this situation.
I want to ask you about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, because Hamas statistics, I think we have to treat them with skepticism, but they say that tens of thousands of people have died in Gaza. What we do know for a fact is that the situation in Gaza, from a humanitarian perspective, is terrible for the people living there. There are innocent men, women, and children who have been shelled, who've been...
And where's the international community condemning Hamas for embedding in the population? What about all that money to create the military infrastructure for Hamas, where it didn't go to educating the citizens, creating better jobs and better infrastructure and better social conditions. There is a group of people that are governing the Palestinians in such a way where they want it to be dire straits, because it allows for that governing body to go to the international community and demonize Israel. They don't want to embetter their people.
Who have been attacked by the Israeli military. It is a war. This is sadly what happens, and there has been a humanitarian catastrophe there. What should Israel's role be? How much ownership of that should it take in regard to the civilian casualties and problems in regard to this?
Look, it happened. In a way for them, it's a tragedy. Israel acted upon the compelling imperative to make sure that such an event will never, ever happen again, which means that we had to destroy both the reigning capabilities of Hamas as well as its capacity to threaten Israel. And I don't think that even our government, which I'm a harsh critic of, thought that it's an ideal picture, so many civilians will be killed, but that's the result of a very tough and very kind of a deliberate plan of Hamas to hide behind those.
But that's not the fault of the civilians. That's not the fault of the civilians, though, is it?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Repeat it, please.
That's not the fault of the civilians, of course.
It doesn't matter. The people, the general public could have fought against Hamas. They could have fought against Hamas before this happened. They could have fought against Hamas while this was happening. Where they can fight against Hamas right now. The people of the Palestinian people could fight against Hamas. It actually helped the Israelis. They chose not to. They chose not to. And Hamas is embedding in the population. This is not a thing that's been happening just recently. This is happening, documented all the way going back to 2010 or 2014. So for 10 years, for 14 years. This is crazy. It's time to root them out. And there's going to be collateral damage. But, that's the only way to do it. Because Hamas knows that if the international community puts enough pressure on Israel and Israel falters, then Hamas lives to fight another day.
The fault of Hamas terrorists,
yeah.
Yeah.
For sure, it's not the civilians. It's not any. We cannot be happy of any individual who killed with that involved.
Of course.
But basically, when you look honestly at the causal chain that caused it, you see the Hamas using a template, a gun to the template of the temple of the public, holding them in the northern part of Gaza after we won once and again over weeks. Go to the south, we have been a tough clash with the Hamas, and we will use weapons.
Let me just ask you just finally, Barak, about what the comments of the Deputy Prime Minister here in the United Kingdom in regard to his belief that Israel is often held to a higher standard internationally, especially in this week, for example. He said there was almost a relish that it was okay in some people's minds to, or there was an excuse, I suppose. That's a crude way of describing it, and I wouldn't want to trivialize the deaths of 7 people, but there are times when certainly the Deputy Prime Minister has said that there is almost a relish that it's fine to criticize Israel for this. Do you feel that your country is held to a higher standard internationally than other countries? Do you feel that is perhaps part of some level of anti-Semitism, or what do you think the reasons for that are?
It's these tragic events. Those people had not just the Gaza, they had Israelis who were kind of suffered after the 7th of October, and they deserve to be alive. It's a tragedy. there was a debriefing. Two kind of senior officers were removed from power. Others were condemned by their superiors. But unfortunately, it cannot bring these innocent fighters for humanitarian cause. Cannot bring them back to life, and that's a real tragedy. We have to do whatever it takes to avoid any such event in the future. And we
on civilian casualties is that just what happens in war? Do you think? Is that? I mean, many people will find that difficult to kind of square.
It is amazing how stupid of a question it is. Of course, there's going to be casualties. All wars have casualties, especially all wars that are consequential, that are important.
Fighters for humanitarian cause cannot bring them back to life, and that's a real tragedy. We have to do whatever it takes to avoid any such event in the future. And we
on civilian casualties is that just what happens in war? Do you think? Is that? I mean, many people will find that difficult to kind of square.
You seem to me to be too young to remember World War II, but I remember it as a very, very young kid. There in the wars, there are several cases that many civilians paid with their life for the tragic aspects of war. And of course, no one can be happy or celebrate. But, and of course, we have to do everything to improve. Especially if we operate in Rafah, it should be made sure that it cannot repeat itself with the same numbers and figures that happened in Gaza.
Yeah,
that's not simple, but I don't think that you find many Israelis who are happy with this. But it's unfortunate. It happened in war. I can only promise you next war there will be less kind of collateral damage or less other innocent people killed, but that cannot it cannot compensate, cannot give anything to those who lost their life or lost their families there.
So that is my take of what is going on in the Middle East. Please subscribe to all my channels. I have 3 channels on YouTube. I have Rumble, Bitchute, and Brighteon. Please make sure you subscribe. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.